Yarg, mateys. Hello, and hi there, and also hello. And what do they say as a pirate? They'd say, Avast! Avast you're scrolling! And come see me, Jenn Zuko, talking about my book, Crowns of Gold, which is right now in Boulder Bookstore, which is a bookstore which I have been going to since I was just a little kid, and I love it so much, and I am so glad that they have my book on their shelves right now. But I'm here to talk to you a little bit about some things about my book, about myself as a writer, and to read you a little wee snippet out of my book. So hi there. My book is called Crowns of Gold, and it says to give a brief synopsis, but you know what? I actually have a brief synopsis here in the book itself. So this book, as you can tell, is a book about pirates mostly, and in the table of contents. So this book is actually not a continuous novel. It is a collection of three stories in one, and they're sort of continuous. They sort of jump around in time a little bit, but here's the synopsis of all three of them. You can find in the table of contents here. So part one is called Sweet Revenge. Of a lost child found and her potent heritage, of the rigors of a slave's life as compared to those on a ship, how a tattoo can be read aloud and followed, of buried treasure, demons, and family vendettas, and how a girl named Geminalia earns her sword and her name. Part two, Romance Among Thieves, in which Jack the Fox, famous gentleman thief, finds himself in hot water, of revenges to and from the Marquis of Meurtrier, of true love and the shenanigans that break loose when rogues find themselves in it. Also, the cowardice of the nobility, though not surprisingly, its stupidity is revealed. And finally, part three is called Eating Swords, Eating Words, in which we see even the truest love turn salty and rough as the sea, of riddle games, both serious and sportive, of Arcady's best knife thrower and a card reader who is not what she seems, of the shadows called Oterin and the corpulent mage who spews them across the world for his evil purposes, of ultimate revenge and familial conclusions. So that's the basic synopsis of the three parts of the story. What inspired me to write this book? A dream I had, actually. So I first finished this book back in the year 2000 when I was just concluding my graduate studies at Naropa for writing. But I had been writing it for a couple of years before that, so I was basically writing this all through the mid to late 90s. And I had a dream sometime in the late 90s, 97, I guess, 96, 97, so kind of mid-ish, late-ish 90s. And it was a very vivid dream, and I don't usually remember my dreams. And so I thought in this case, it's probably a good idea if I wrote it down, because if I'm going to remember the dream, there's got to be some sort of important reason why my brain decided to keep a hold of it. And the dream was very vivid. It was me swimming away down, like through this kind of sludgy, swampy river water, I guess, and saw my actual friend, whose name was Mara at the time, swimming away from me, and I was trying to get to her. Behind me, there was a sort of like a white colonial house that looked like a classic plantation sort of big house, and there was a little man running out of it yelling and stuff, and it seemed, I didn't know in the dream what the deal was with that, but I wanted to get away from him, and I wanted to get to my friend who was going, like, she was way down in this like thick muddy river, and way ahead we could see this like shadowy form, this sort of humanoid figure, but it was all in shadows. It was hovering above, and it was beckoning like this. And then way past that, even, there was this big ship. It looked like your classic pirate galleon that you always see illustrated. And I woke up very soon after that, and I was like, wow, okay, well, that's interesting. Cool. So I wrote it down and kind of left it there for a little bit, and then I went back, and it was just in my journal. And I thought, well, what happens next, I wonder? So I decided that the little man running after us was like an indentured servant owner, or the head of the indentured servants or slaves, and The ship has to be a pirate ship because come on, right? And so I just started writing, and I just wasn't planning it from there, which actually leads me to one of the questions here. What is question 5 here is, what does your writing process look like? When I'm writing fiction or poetry, I do just that. I just start with a thing and I just go with it. I go with the flow. I make no plans. Any plans I might make, I do after the fact. But when I'm writing a fiction, oh, I'm a little crooked here. When I'm writing fiction or poetry, I think they call it pantsing in writing, where you just go for it and just do it and see what happens, and then you can go back and edit it and make it coherent later. That's how I did this book. But when I'm writing essays, which I'm doing a lot of these days on my Substack, I actually do outlines most of the time, unless I'm telling a story, in which case I may just start with the story and just write the story once upon a time and just go. But usually when it's nonfiction, in other words, or essays, I will edit. I will do an outline first, and then I will fill in the outline is how I write those. But with stories or verse, I just go for it. And that's how this book came out. It was so that was what inspired me to write the book in general. As you can tell, there's probably, if you've read it at this point, you should read it. It's pretty good. It's short too. It's very fun. There are some other inspirations. The novel called Mara, Daughter of the Nile, by, what is her name? McGraw. McGraw is her last name. Eloise Jarvis McGraw. The horrible movie that I love unironically called Cutthroat Island also has a master thief in it, which you will notice, and a woman pirate. Mine's different than that as far as like story goes and stuff like that, but like just some of the icons. Also, the Master Thief tales. I've always been very interested in Master Thief. Now, before you think about the video games, I actually wrote this story before the games came out. Once the games came out, I was obsessed with the games, but the games are they're a lot more sort of dark and Victorian, and this is a lot more sort of bright and like early 1700s or golden age of piracy, which is like 1740s, something like that. So it's a lot more tricorn hat than like smoky Victorian. But anyway, and just pirate lore in general. Pirates are really fun. I did a lot of research for this book, even though it's a work of fiction. And boy, if you want to have some fun research rabbit holes, just research pirates from real life. It is fun as heck. So I would recommend that. What question next? How did your knowledge of writing, literature, and the performing arts influence the story? Well, that was one thing that my editor noticed, and you'll notice if you look at the blurb in the back that he wrote, it's the fight scenes. I was very heavily involved in a stage combat troupe. We were doing lots of performances, and we were teaching and taking classes. So I was right in the sort of peak of my early learning of the arts of stage combat and theatrical sword fighting and stuff like that. I don't have a sword with me right now. What is wrong with me? Oh well. So I was very heavily involved in that, and so I wanted to have very elaborate, exact descriptions of fight scenes in this, because pirates are swashbuckling, and that's what they do. They swashbuckles and buckle swashes. But I've also been a lifelong fantasy fan, so I've always loved fantasy. Some of my favorites are the Earthsea, well, at the time, trilogy, and then later it was 4 books, and now it's this entire beautiful sweeping epic by Ursula Le Guin. Those are some of the best things ever written. Later in life, I got into the Fritz Leiber Fafner and the Grey Mouser stories. So I sword and sorcery and fantasy, obviously Lord of the Rings, duh. So I've always loved stuff like that, and so I wanted to do a sort of swashbuckling, kind of naughty, like not this sort of like robust, beautiful, pure of morality sort of Lord of the Rings, but more like a kind of a grody sort of Fafhrd and Grey Mouse. They're kind of like, the good guys are better than the bad guys, like a little. So I kind of wanted to go there. I didn't go quite as R-rated as the Fritz Leiber stories. I'm sort of more at I would say a PG-13, NC-17 kind of level of naughtiness in this one. But anyway, so that's really what influenced me. The fight scenes really are a huge influence in this. I'm gonna need my my pirate reading glasses. Aren't I still very threatening and yeah, okay, anyway. What kind of reader would enjoy this book? Any fans of pirates, of which I know there are lots. Again, back when I wrote this, there was no Pirates of the Caribbean except in the old ride at Disneyland. So if you like the Pirates of the Caribbean series, if you like any pirates, if you are a cosplayer or a reenactor, if you are like a Ren Fair nerd, you would love that too. At the time that I was writing this, I was a Ren Fair worker. Anyone who's interested in martial arts of any kind, swordplay martial arts, stage combat, any martial arts of the European variety, you would like this. Any D&D nerds, you would love it too. Another point I should say about it, I know I mentioned this before, but I should say that for littler kids or for younger teenagers, this is probably a little nasty. It's not rated R, it's rated PG-13, or NC-17 maybe, but I just check it out. Your child may vary, you know what you like if you're a kid, or if you are a person who has a kid they like who wants to buy them a pirate book, just look it over. It's YA, I would say. What does my writing process look like? Went over that. What are a couple of books I've read recently that I really loved? I have been doing 2 specific rereads for some read-along events that are happening with some of my Substack friends. I am rereading Beowulf. We're doing the Seamus Heaney translation. I also love the Maria Headley translation too, just because it starts with the word bro, and it's just so fun. So I'm rereading this, and it's really fun. Beowulf is, talk about an adventure story, right? It is an OG adventure story, and it's pretty great. I'm also rereading Lord of the Rings. I don't even know how many re's I need to say, how many times I've read Lord of the Rings. But there's another 2 read-alongs actually that are going on Substack, which I am joining. And actually the way I'm reading it this time is I am listening to the audiobook that Andy Serkis narrates. And when I tell you that when you're doing a weight training workout, and you're listening to the Andy Serkis Lord of the Rings, it is the best thing. It is the best combination. Sometimes like you're lifting weights and you're with Frodo and Sam and Smeagol, and you're like, oh, it's like hardship, and oh, if only we can get like the next 2 steps before dark, and it's great. Other times it's like rousing and rollicking. Like I'm on the rowing machine, and like Theoden is like, a red day, a sword day. It's like so awesome. I highly recommend it. Anyway, I'm also reading collections of personal essays just because I have a memoir that's coming up, and I am just inundating myself with the genre that I'm trying to be excellent at. Another one that's kind of relevant to this book, of my book, it's this book called And a Bottle of Rum. And this is it's a history book. It goes through the history of rum and the rum cocktails, and like how rum was invented and where it spread, and when it was popular and with whom and who made it and who it was. It's very interesting. It's like a amazing history of America and the Caribbean, but just through this one particular product. It's really interesting. I highly recommend it. Anyway, that's it. I have one fun fact about pirates before I read the section from my book that I'm about to read. Are you ready? Fun fact. Fun fact. The pirate accent that we all know and love, right? The yar matey, I'll feed you to the sharks, like all that stuff. That was invented by actor Robert Newton for his portrayal of Long John Silver in the 1950 adaptation of Treasure Island. Usually before that, pirates didn't really have a pirate accent. That's not actually a pirate accent. That's an accent he decided to put on to play that character. I think it had to do with some of his extended family was in the West. Is that West Country? I'm an Anglophile, but I'm blanking on it right now. Any of you Brits or Anglophiles, let me know. It's West Country accent, I think. So he just decided to do that for the character. Usually pirates historically would just sound like any pirates, just because they would sound like where they were from. There were French pirates, there were African pirates, there were English, all kinds of Spanish. One of the best woman pirates of all of history is a Chinese pirate who had like a fleet of ships and stuff like that. Like she was incredible. So, they would just sound like anything wherever they were from. But it was Robert Newton in 1950 in that movie that came up with what we think of now as a pirate accent. And now for a little excerpt from Crowns of Gold by me, Jenn Zuko. This is a fight scene from towards the beginning of the first book. Take that, spawn of the devil! Thwang! Gemma whirls around. Protruding from the mast, inches from her right shoulder, is a sextant, the sharp end embedded into the wood. It trembles with the impact. She turns back around to face her assailant. 3 rigging lackeys lounge on barrels, ropes, the rail. The man in the center, one arbiter, curses at his near miss. The other 2 laugh. Here's the instrument to stick in a pretty walking map, the mustachioed pirate on the left jeers. The right-hand lackey, lounging on the rail, grabs his trousers and gestures lewdly. Gemma frowns. Jack O'Napes is nowhere in sight. Meeting her uncle the captain, no doubt. The rest of the crew is far from them and noisily working. Arbiter fidgets. He looks uncomfortable. He doesn't know what to do with his hands. His 2 flanking cohorts advance on the girl, leering, muttering under their breath. Gemma catches a few phrases. Tie her up and hang her. Our treasure. Nothing but a little girl. At that, the right-hand lackey clutches himself again, replies, I'll make her into a woman, Scrike, you hold her. Gemma tenses, every muscle on the alert. Arbiter backs up slowly, biting his fingers. Now! Shouts the right-hand lackey and lunges at her. She draws her sword so quickly he runs straight into it. The point pierces his abdomen. He gasps in pain and fury. She wrenches the sword free and faces her other opponent, who whisks his sword out of his scabbard and squares off. Arbiter drags his bleeding, cursing other crony downstairs, calling for the captain. Scrike swipes a cut at Gemma's left side, which she parries easily. He is already breathing too heavily in anticipation. Gemma can see his next move in his eyes. She thwarts Scrike's expected thrust and binds his blade around, surprising him with her strength and exposing the left side of his back. She cuts quickly towards his kidney, but he somehow twists out of his awkward position and beats her blade away with his. Gemma hears running feet below ships and on the hollow-sounding stairs, but all her thoughts are on her opponent, her breathing, her footing. His blade, her blade. His next thrust is far too sloppy, he being still off balance. She pushes aside the off-center miss and aims this time for his right calf. He won't expect a blow so low. Just as she thought, the cut draws blood. He sucks in a ragged breath and falls to his knees. He's not through yet, however. He shoves his blade straight like a battering ram towards her solar plexus. She parries the desperate thrust and wrenches his sword right out of his hand. It circles out of his control and clatters to the deck. It spins itself across the deck and lands at the feet of Jack O'Napes, who has appeared from below ships. The captain stands next to him. Gemma points her sword at the hollow of Scrike's throat. He, panting, sweating, eyes her with awe. Apologize, she says between clenched teeth. When he does not respond, she places the point of her blade right up against the depression at the base of his neck. He swallows with difficulty. Apologize, she sings to him. Say you're sorry in front of the captain. Her vision widens and she notices that the whole crew is assembled like a theater crowd. And all the crew. Then, she lowers her voice and moves a step closer. Kiss my foot and promise you shall never try me again. At the word never, she pricks his skin ever so slightly. He tenses. I'm sorry. That's right. Captain Jonquil, sir, you crew. I behaved like an ass. This makes the crew growl in malicious laughter. I'll never threaten the gem again, to y'all I do swear. His voice seeps with humiliation. She moves the sword away from his throat. A tiny bead of blood wells up from the spot. They look into each other's eyes for 2 heartbeats. Then he bows to the floor and brushes his mustache against her left foot. She smirks. The crew bursts into a roar. Captain Jonquil picks him up by the scruff. The crew quiets. Captain Jonquil speaks, holding Scrike by the back of his neck. Know this. If any man Jackie you ever so much as dreams of touching our gem with unclean intent, you shall be fodder for the sharks. Understood? A murmur of assent. She is my child, more than my brother's, and is no devil's whelp. She shall get her share, you scurrilous son of a pig. This last comment is directed at the wounded and gasping rigging lackey she skewered. And she's a better seaman than you, Arbiter. The man bows his head. For you, Scrike, to be this badly beaten by a woman should be enough punishment for you. Yet, the proper punishment for the attack of a fellow crew member, according to our code, which you dutifully signed when you boarded, the crew murmurs again, is 12 lashes with the cat o' nine. No, Onapes, take him and bestow the honors upon him. Jack hoists the sagging Scrike by the arm and drags him away. Captain Jonquil addresses the crew once more. I ask you, men, is Diminalia one of us? Yea or nay? Yay! Bellow the assembled men. Gemma blushes all the way to her fingertips. And you know to treat her as such. Yay! I trust that these 3 lily-livered curs are the only ones on my crew not man enough to recognize her worth on this ship. Yea, Captain, yells Tomini, and the crew roar their approval. The captain raises his hand. Enough! To work, you lubbers! Haul in, you worse than whale's bile! Full to! Man the ropes, you swabs! We port tomorrow! And barking orders, the captain batters them all into place. Okay, well that's it for this. There's little spoilers, but not really. We kind of find out about family stuff right in the beginning. So that's a tiny little snippet. I don't know what snippet I'm going to be reading at the event at Boulder Bookstore on July 1st, but I hope you come to hear some more. And thank you so much. Feel free to email me if you want to have any other questions about it or about anything about my book or the reading or anything else. And have a great rest of your day, and thanks.